Hello everyone. Is the slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Whenever I am asking anything, somebody from you please respond to me. Shall we start? Because I think there are a few number of students today. Any reason behind it? Okay. So today your class is going to start at 11 o'clock. Okay. Okay, fine. So let us wait for another 1 or 2 minutes. Then we'll start. Actually, anybody has any idea by what time your semesters are going to start? Have you got any news? Yes,
26th of July.
26th of June. Okay, because exactly that is what I have just been informed. But most probably, previously it was scheduled towards the second week of August, and I was not thinking that they will be carrying for such a long time this semester. So they have preponed it. That's a good thing because we are already running late by around 2 to 3 months. So usually your second semester should have ended by May or June, maximum June, and your new session should have started by July. So it's okay if we are late by a fortnight. That is not at all a big deal. So we'll wait for some time, then we'll start. Let the others join. What about the other subjects? Are they on the verge of completion? Is there any subject which is already completed? No.
No, sir.
Okay. So everybody is in the same field, right?
Yes, sir.
Because as I told you, initially I used to go a little bit slow because during that time we have to get acquainted with ourselves. The students and the teacher must get acquainted with each other. And secondly, the subject, the basic things are always lumped up in the very initial part of the syllabus. So if we'll go in a little bit slow manner, then it's well and good. But the problem is that if we'll go by that speed throughout this entire syllabus, we cannot complete it. So usually first 2 to 3 chapters, I usually go slow, then I pick up the speed. And in case anywhere you feel that I am going a little bit fast, then please be frank. Tell me honestly. I'll reduce my speed. But I don't think I am going in a very fast pace.
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. So let us start our day today. So in the last class, we have talked about the sources of magnetostatic field. Over there, I have told you that basically there are two types of magnets. One is a permanent magnet. The permanent magnets may be having different shapes. Bar magnet, your C-shaped magnet, all these are nothing but your permanent magnets. Then we can also design a source of magnetostatics by using electromagnets. In that case, we will be using a coil wound over some iron core or some ferrometallic core, so that when we will pass a steady current, that is a DC current, then it is going to produce a steady magnetic field, or rather a magnetostatic field. So this thing we have already discussed. Next we discussed about the magnetic field lines. Over there I have told you, unlike the most important thing is that unlike your electric field, your magnetic field lines are not known as magnetic lines of forces. It is because electric field lines, they are going to be always directed in the direction of the electric force on any particle, whereas your magnetic field, they are not going to show you the direction of the magnetic force on the moving particle. So this is one of the most important differences. The other differences we have already discussed. For example, when we are discussing about isolated charges, I told you that in case of magnetic field or magnetostatic field, an isolated pole never exists. That means a monopole is just a theoretical thing. Practically, it can never exist. Even though we do some mathematical calculations, though they are out of the scope of this syllabus, but there are certain ways we also do some theoretical calculation on monopoles. Because those who are from electronics and communication background, they will learn about antennas, dipole antennas, monopole antennas. Over there, they are going to deal with these types of monopole things. But the truth is that practically monopole cannot exist, because whatever be the magnet, if we are going to break it, then obviously we are again going to get a pair of magnets with a pair of north and south pole. So this is the truth, this is the fact. Another important thing that we learned, that in case of electrostatic field, if we are having a charge which may be a stationary charge or maybe a moving charge, it is going to experience a electric force. Whereas in case of magnetic field, if we are having a stationary charge, then it is not going to face or experience any sort of magnetic force. Only when the charge is going to move in the magnetic field, only then we are going to experience a magnetic force on the charge, moving charge. Why it is so? Because in the last class I explained you that your magnetic force is given by the expression QVB, sine theta a cap. Now over there, V is nothing but the velocity at which the charge, the moving charge, is going to enter into the magnetic field. So if V is equal to 0, so naturally the magnetic force is also going to be equal to 0. So always remember that these three are the most vital differences between your electric and magnetic field, even though they are going to have some sort of nature which are quite similar. The next important thing is which is also similar as well as quite dissimilar. That is the application of Gauss law. Now, obviously, we are not actually going to apply Gauss law in case of your magnetic field, but we will try to learn what is the Gauss law for your magnetostatic field. Now, we have already studied about this electric means Gauss law applied to electric field, electrostatic field, and today we'll also learn about this Gauss law for this magnetostatic field. Over there, we will see what is the major difference between them. But before that, we must learn about magnetic flux. Now we have something known as your electric flux. Your magnetic flux will also be defined in exactly the same manner. Obviously, there is not much difference between them, except in place of electric field, we will represent the magnetic field. Otherwise, there is absolutely no difference between the two types of flux. When I was defining or explaining this electric flux, over there I told you that if there are n number of lines of electric field, and I am going to take a area, unit area, and keep it perpendicular to the electric field lines, only those lines which are actually going to pass through the surface, unit area surface perpendicularly, will contribute to the electric flux. The same definition, exactly the same definition, is also applicable for the magnetic flux. Now let us see what is this magnetic flux. Now just imagine that I am having a magnetic field lines like this. Let us say these magnetic field lines are all straight lines. That means this is a uniform magnetic field, I am going to keep an unit area which is perpendicular to this magnetic field lines. So let us say there are a number of magnetic field lines, and out of these 5 number of magnetic field lines, all of them are contributing to the magnetic field, whereas you can see only 3 number of lines. So this line and this line as well as this line, all these 3 lines are the one which are actually going to cross this area perpendicularly. So naturally these 3 lines are only going to form the magnetic flux phi b. Okay, and similar to that of your electric flux, this magnetic flux is again a scalar quantity. Now why it is going to be a scalar quantity, let us try to understand. Now for that, let us consider this surface area. So this is a irregular piece of surface area, and let us say this area is total area is equal to S. Now let me take a very small area over here. Let us say that area is equal to dA. So I have taken a very small, infinitesimally small area out of this entire surface S, and out of this, as you can see, the magnetic field is moving at some angle. So these are your magnetic field lines. Let us consider this line. Now as I told you that the magnetic field line which is actually going to pass through this area perpendicularly is actually going to contribute to the magnetic flux. So naturally if this decompose it into its components, so you will see that this component is actually the component which is actually tangential, or rather I will say parallel to the surface of this area, whereas this component of B vector is actually going to be perpendicular to the surface area. Now, so this is the only component which is actually going to contribute to the magnetic flux. Now, if I will write this B perpendicular in terms of this B, then I will say that your B perpendicular is equal to your B cos phi. And what is this phi? Phi is the angle which this B vector is actually making with respect to the direction of the area. Now, obviously, I have told you that area is a vector quantity and its direction is always perpendicular to the surface of the area. And secondly, we have to take only that direction from which side we are actually referring the entire setup. So obviously over here you can see that your area vector is directed in this direction, and this one is your B perpendicular. Therefore this angle is phi. And please remember that over here we are not interested in the orientation of phi, because ultimately this B perpendicular is equal to B cos phi. And as I told you that when I am dealing with cos term, I am actually not interested in the orientation of this phi, because B cos phi is same as B cos of minus phi. So in this way, I can say that this component B cos phi is the one which is actually going to cross this area dA perpendicularly. So over here, we all know that your flux is nothing but the field multiplied with the surface. So over here, if I am writing it as d phi, why I am writing it as d phi? Because I have referred only a very small area dA. So if this is the case, so that's why I write d phi b. B is to indicate that it is magnetic flux. In case of electric flux, I used to write phi e. But in order to differentiate between the two fluxes, I have written it as phi b. So d phi b is equal to the component of the B vector which is perpendicularly crossing the area. So it is B cos phi over here multiplied with the area, that is dA. Now this B is a vector quantity and dA is also a vector quantity. Now if we will minutely look at this particular expression, it is very clear that this is nothing but the dot product of B vector dot dA vector. So ultimately we can write that d phi b is equal to B vector dot dA vector. But most of the time we are actually interested to evaluate the total flux, magnetic flux through any area. So in that case, I will write it as phi b, and phi b is equal to the integration of b vector dot dA vector, which is also same as b cos phi dA. Now, another important thing that we need to take into account is that in case of electric field or electric flux, we are very much looking into the concept of closed surface area. But in case of magnetic field or magnetic flux, we are not interested in the closed surface area. Now, why we are not interested will be clear when we will study about the Gauss law. So rather than writing it in this manner or writing the integration as a closed integral, we rather write it as an open integral like this. Okay. So I hope everybody have understood very simple things. Now, what is the unit of this flux? The unit of this flux, magnetic flux, is Weber. Okay. Same as that of your electric flux. Next comes the Gauss law for magnetism. Okay. So as I have told you, there are a lot of similarities between your electric field, electrostatic field, and magnetostatic field. So whatever we have covered in your electrostatic field, all those stuff will also be covered in your magnetostatic field. So in the electrostatic field, we have studied about electric flux, and once we have some ample knowledge about this electric flux, we switched on to the Gauss law for electrostatic field. Now, similarly, once we have gained some idea about this magnetic flux, we will move on to Gauss law for magnetism. Okay. So previously, let us try to see what does Gauss law says for a electrostatic field. So Gauss law says that your flux phi E, that is the electric flux, is equal to the total charge enclosed by a closed surface, divided by epsilon 0, that is the permittivity of the closed surface. Okay. So this is what was mathematically represented by means of Gauss law for electrostatic field. Now this was equal to closed surface integral, because I am talking about a closed surface. So closed surface integral E vector dot dA vector. So this is what I was writing for your Gauss law for electrostatic field. Now let us see whether this type of equation still holds for your magnetism or magnetostatic field or not. Now, so over here, just have a look. By analogy, if there are such a thing such as single magnetic charge or magnetic monopole, the total magnetic flux through a closed surface would be proportional to the total magnetic charge enclosed. That means just imagine that I am having a magnet which is only having a single pole. There is no south pole. So it is just a magnet with a monopole N. So if that is the case and I am going to enclose it inside a Gaussian surface, then obviously the magnetic field lines, or rather I will say the fluxes, are going to move out in this manner. So if this is the case, then I could have written the equation Gauss law like this: phi B is equal to the total magnetic charge. So charge for this magnetic field Qm by mu 0. Mu 0 is permeability, and I will tell you what is this permeability later on in the next chapter. So this should have been the equation, and obviously the second part of this equation would have been closed surface integral of B vector dot dA vector. I could have easily written it in this manner. Absolutely the same expression as that of the other one, except that in place of electric charge I will put magnetic charge, and in place of electric field I will put the magnetic field. That's it. But the problem is that in case of your magnetostatic field or any magnetism or anything related to magnetism, there is no concept of a single magnetic charge or a magnetic monopole. So whatever be the magnet, it is definitely going to have a pair of poles, north and south pole. So if that is the case, then in this case, the Gauss law is going to have a different type of expression. So obviously, since north and south pole will be there, how this the entire scenario will look something like this. So as you can see, here I am having a north pole and here I am having a south pole, and let us say this is your Gaussian surface. This is your Gaussian surface. Now what is the total magnetic charge that is enclosed? Can anybody tell me? What is the total magnetic charge that is enclosed by this Gaussian surface? Yes, anyone?
0.
Yes, of course it is 0. Why it is 0? Very well, you can see that the flux lines from the North Pole, they are moving outwards like this, and I have already told you that these lines will always terminate at the South Pole. So from here it will start, maybe it will end over here in this manner at the South Pole. Similarly, this one will move towards infinite and somehow it will come back and it will be terminating at the South Pole. Similarly, for this one will move in this manner and it will terminate at the South Pole. That means whatever flux is coming out from the North Pole, the same amount of flux is going to move towards the South Pole. So in total, the total magnetic charge is equal to 0. That means the total flux coming out of a closed surface in case of your magnetic field is equal to 0. So if it is 0 for a closed one, then obviously if it is an open one, then also it is going to be 0. So that is the reason why over here you can see I have not used a closed surface integral, because in case of closed magnetic field, closed surface integral does not matter at all, because even if it is a closed one or it is an open surface, doesn't matter, because if you are enclosing a magnet wholly, then obviously the total flux coming out is always going to be equal to 0, because whatever be the flux that is coming out of the North Pole will be same as that entering into the South Pole through the Gaussian surface. So ultimately we can say your phi b is equal to 0, and obviously your b vector dot dA vector is also going to be equal to 0. So this is known as the Gauss law for magnetism. So ultimately I can write this in this manner. Your phi b is equal to 0 by, sorry, this is 0 by mu 0, because the total magnetic charge enclosed by any Gaussian surface is always equal to 0, is equal to, either I can write it as closed surface integral or a open surface integral, doesn't matter, because in both the cases it is going to be 0. So let us write it in this manner. So if this is the case, b vector dot dA vector, and ultimately this is equal to 0. So that's it. So this is your entire or generalized form of Gauss law for your magnetostatic field. But remember, it is only for magnetostatic field. But if it is a electromagnetic field, definitely this is not going to be equal to 0. Because I told you that if there is a varying magnetic field, it will lead to the formation of your varying electric field and vice versa. Okay. So this is the expression or the generalized expression for Gauss law for magnetism. Is there any doubt in this slide? Just remember
Sir.
the difference. Yes.
Sir, I was
Tell me.
asking that. What is the reason behind the number of field lines leaving the North Pole is equal to a number of field lines entering the South Pole?
Very simple. Just see, nothing in this world is created or destroyed. Now you see these magnetic field lines, obviously they are coming out from somewhere, means they are going to end at somewhere. Okay. Now you may ask that sometimes I am telling that in case of isolated positive or negative charges, these lines, they are starting from the center of the point charge and moving towards infinite. But remember that even though they are moving towards infinite, that means at infinite, there must be some negative charge at which these electric field lines are going to terminate. Okay. So if this is the concept, the same thing is applied over here. That means any field line, whether it is the electrostatic field line or it is a magnetostatic field line, or it is a electromagnetic wave. Everywhere it is going to, there must be a source and there must be a point where it is going to terminate. Otherwise the net energy is going not going to be equal to zero or constant. So that means just have a very simple thing. Let us see. Now you will say inside the sun there is a fusion reaction, and because of this fusion reaction, lots of heat is generated, lot of stray neutrons are emitted, and cosmic energy is also emitted. Now remember, where if it is starting from the sun, it is also ending somewhere. That means while it is traveling, and while it is traveling, it is absorbed by the surface vacuum, because nothing is purely vacuum. Some, there must be some matter which is actually absorbing this energy. Secondly, they are falling to the surface of the planets where their atmosphere is also absorbing. That means somewhere there must be a source and there must be a sink where everything is going to end. In Hindu mythology, you will also see if Lord Brahma is actually creating something, Vishnu is maintaining them, there must be one Rudra who is actually terminating everything. This is the concept which is every time applicable to entire physics. Now over here you see North Pole, the field lines are actually coming out. Unlike your isolated positive charge or a negative charge, where the field lines are actually terminating at infinite. Actually, they are not terminating at infinite, because at infinite we consider that there must be a similar negative charge. If obviously, because if there is a positive charge, there must be one negative charge somewhere. Where? Because everything is trying to be in a neutral state. The entire universe as a whole is in neutral state. It is not charged. That means if we have separated one positive charge, then there must be one negative charge for this positive charge, even though it is located at infinite. That means if the electric field lines are starting from the positive charge, it must end at the negative charge, where even if it is located at infinite. But in case of your magnetic field, the concept is a little bit different. How it is different? Because here you cannot separate north and south pole. So if there are 50 number of magnetic field lines which are originating from the north pole, then there must be 50 number of lines which are terminating at the south pole. If this is the case, then we know that if we will enclose this entire magnet inside a closed surface, then whatever flux is moving out, that much flux will be terminating inside the south pole. So if we'll add both of them, it is going to result in a zero. Got the idea?
Sir, then why the magnetic monopole is hypothetical, whereas the electric charges are actually possible to exist?
Okay, very simple thing. Now it is always possible to separate a positive charge from a negative charge. Okay, so whether you have studied in 8th class or 9th class regarding that Rutherford's model, all this thing you have studied, that means if you are bombarding some energy towards a atom, then since the electrons are lightly bonded to the positive charge and they are quite far away from the nucleus, therefore you can separate them. But what about the magnet? Now, what is actually a magnet? So basically a magnet is nothing but, or it is consisting of microscopic number of magnets, all of them aligned in the same line like this. So all the magnets are actually made of microscopic magnets like this. So if the North Pole is over here, all of them will have the North Pole oriented in the same line. All of them will have the North Pole oriented in the same direction. So ultimately the resultant will be a North Pole over here and a South Pole over here. Now you break this one over here in between the middle. Still then what you are getting? You are still getting some two pairs of North Pole and South Pole, North Pole and South Pole on the right side. On the left side also you are getting the same number of magnets. So ultimately if we will break this one again will form another new magnet which is having a net North Pole on this direction and a net South Pole on this direction. So it is not possible to break them. Even though you are breaking them, inside it you have a North and South Pole. But just look about the atoms. So you are having all the positive charges which are on this center of this nucleus, and around it all the electrons are moving. So these electrons, they are lightly bonded, because as you move ahead or far away from the center, then obviously what is going to happen, the force of attraction is also going to decrease. Now you give some energy and you try to break it, they are going to easily break. So all the positive charges over here will be over here, and one of the electrons can be eliminated. So in this way, you can easily get an isolated positive charge or a negative charge. But if you are trying to break this magnet, you are again going to get another two pairs of magnet with same north and south pole. Got it?
Yes, sir. I am asking that only. Why it is different from that charge?
Why it is different from the charge? Okay, you are asking that if I am going to break the magnet, why I am going to get another pair of magnet? Is it?
Yes, sir. Why we are not able
Okay,
to
okay, okay,
separate
okay,
north
okay.
and
Let
south
me tell
pole?
you. Okay, okay. Very nice. Let me tell you. Just a minute. Let me clear it. Okay. Now, do you know why at all magnetism exists? Let us have a look at the microscopic level, atomic level. Now, your magnetic energy is only existing because your electrons are spinning around their own axis. Okay. Now, just imagine you are having one atom. So you are having all the positive charges over here, all the positive charges, and you have the electrons on the outer side. Well and good. So over here, one of the electron is over here, the other electron is over here. We are considering, let us say, hydrogen case, two positive charge, two negative electrons. Now you apply a force. If you apply a force, one of the electron is emitted. Okay. Now this electron itself is moving around its axis, even though it is isolated. So when something is moving around its axis and it is having some charge, so you know what is the result. Because magnetism always arises if a charge is in motion. So naturally it will have a north and south pole. But in this case, you just applied some force, you have separated the positive and negative charges, and therefore you are getting isolated positive charge and isolated negative charge. But in this case, even though you are breaking one of the electrons, now this electron is separated and is moving on its own away from the origin. Then even in this case, the electrons are actually spinning around its own axis. And remember, whenever a charge rotates, whether it spins or it moves in a linear manner or it moves in a oscillatory manner, it always results in a magnetic field. So that is the reason why, even if you, now obviously you cannot break this electron. You can, if you are suppose you are having a pair of electrons, each of them are rotating in means opposite direction. Even if you are breaking it, you will again get two number of electrons, and each of them are again going to spin around their own axis, forming a north and south pole. Got it? Got it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that is the reason why you can never ever eliminate a north pole from a south pole. But in case of charge, you can easily do it. So that is the major difference between your sources of your electrostatic field and your magnetostatic field. Okay, now let us move on. Now let us talk about motion of charged particle in magnetic field. Okay, so fine, we have studied about that in case of your electric field, the force is always going to act whether the charge is moving or is stationary. But in case of your magnetic field, your charge must be moving so as to experience a magnetic force. And that magnetic force is given by the expression Fm vector is equal to Q whole into a cross product of V vector and B vector. Okay. Now, just imagine a case where I am having a magnetic field. Okay. So if I am having a magnetic field which is directed into the screen, okay, that means it is directed into the screen of your laptop or your mobile. Now, suppose one electron, so there was a positive charge was over here, and this positive charge entered into this magnetic field. And remember, this is a uniform magnetic field. So this positive charge enters into this uniform magnetic field, and while it is moving at the point 0, let us say its speed was equal to v vector. Okay, now what is going to happen? Now when such a thing used to happen, this positive charge is actually going to rotate in a circle. Okay, it is going to rotate in a circular manner, and it is going to rotate forever. Why? Because when we are talking about positive charges and a magnetic field, these positive charges are very small, where almost the effect of this gravitation is very small, or it is almost negligible. So if you leave it like this, it is going to rotate forever. Now, this is the top view and this is the side view. Now the question is, why, if I am going to throw a positive charge into a uniform magnetic field, why it is going to rotate in a circular manner? What is the reason behind it? Very simple reason is there. So let me show you actually what is going to happen. Now we all know that whenever a charge, whether it is a positive charge or a negative charge, doesn't matter. Whenever a charge is moving inside a magnetic field, it is going to experience a magnetic force on it. Now, suppose over here I will throw a positive charge will be bombarded into this uniform magnetic field, and at the point is O, let us say this is the point of reference where we are going to do the calculations. So over here, actually the speed is equal to V over here. Now the field is directed perpendicularly to the velocity. Now, if this is the case, we all know that your Fm is given by Q VB sine theta. VBB sine theta. Now over here, what is theta? Theta is nothing but the angle between your V vector directed towards B vector. Now here V vector is in this direction and B vector is perpendicularly inside the screen. So naturally in between them, the angle theta is equal to 90 degree. So in this case, the force Fm is equal to nothing but QVB. Okay. Now just look over here. Now this force is always perpendicular to both the velocity vector as well as the magnetic field vector. Now if this is the case, this force is actually going to be directed towards this in this manner. That means it is not only going to be perpendicular to V vector, it is also going to be perpendicular to the B vector. Now in this case, your Fm vector, let us say, is directed over here. Now if this is the case, just please have a closer look over here. Now Vha vector, which is trying to pull it in this direction, and F is a vector which is trying to pull the particle onto this side. So naturally the resultant will be another vector over here, because when two vectors, they are perpendicular to each other, then there will be a third vector which is going to make some angle to both of them. Now if F and B were same in magnitude, then it would have been 45 degree. But since F and B are not going to be the same in magnitude, so let us say the resultant vector is this one, and this one puts this particle positive charge to the point P. Now at the point P, obviously the same thing is happening. The velocity is trying to move in this manner, and the field is always directed into the paper, and therefore your F is going to be perpendicular to both of them. So here it is going to be perpendicular to B. Here also it is going to be perpendicular to B as well as B vector. So if we will do that, we will see that the A vector is directed in this manner. So if we will trace it at every point, then we will see that all the magnetic force is actually directed towards this point, and in total the motion is going to be circular in nature. Got the idea? Or is there any doubt? Okay, let me show you it another way. Let me show you it another way. Okay, just have a look at this diagram. Can you see? I have just rotated this one. B vector is directed. Now this is the side view. This was the top view. From the top you can see the positive charge is actually moving in the anticlockwise direction. Now just have a look. Here B vector is directed downwards, B vector is perpendicular to this B vector. Naturally, the force or the magnetic force, as you can see, it's not only perpendicular to B, it is also perpendicular to B. Can you see it or not? Now, if this is the case, what is going to happen? The resultant vector, because V is a vector quantity, F is a vector quantity, and both of them are acting on the same particle. So the resultant is going to be in this manner. So after some time, the positive charge will come to this position. At this position also, your V vector is in this manner and your F vector is like this. So after some time, both of them are acting on the same particle. So this one is going to be the next position where your positive charge is going to reside. And over here, this is again your V vector. Again, your F vector is like this. So if you will do this, you will see that this is actually going to make a circular path in this manner. Everybody understood? Or is there any doubt? Yes, anybody with any sort of doubt? It may look a little bit
No, sir.
difficult, but truly speaking, it is very, very easy. And remember one thing, when you have entered into engineering, you have to imagine a lot of things. Okay, so every time you have to visualize the concept. Now, when we were students, we are also visualizing all these things. So it is not a very big deal for us. So naturally, you can visualize what is actually happening. Your B vector is directed, because obviously I can understand, because all these are 3D geometry. And 3D is something which is a little bit, everybody feels it a little bit difficult to understand. But truly speaking, at this time, after completing your +2, all these 3D things are very easy. So as you can see, B is perpendicular to B vector, and this Fm vector is perpendicular to both B vector as well as B vector. So if this is the case, then obviously the resultant is going to move the particle to another position. Now, because of this continuous application of force and velocity and the magnetic field, this particle, positive charge particle, is actually going to rotate in anti-clockwise direction. Okay. Now, if in place of this positive charge, I would have replaced it with a negative charge, then the direction would have been in the clockwise direction. That's the only difference. Because you know that I have already told you regarding the direction of the magnetic force, that it is always going to be opposite if I am going to reverse the polarity of the particle or the charged particle. Okay. So this is what is written over here. Whatever I have explained, that is written over here in these lines. Now let us, okay. Now already we came to know that if we are having a uniform magnetic field and I am going to direct a particle into this uniform magnetic field with a velocity v, and this velocity v is perpendicular to b vector, then it is going to exhibit a circular motion. Okay. Now, it is going to exhibit a circular motion. Okay, fine. Next, if it is going to rotate in a circular motion, then obviously it is going to trace a path which is a circle. Now, if it is a circle, then it must be having one radius. Now, what is that radius? Now, you people will wonder why we are so much concerned about the movement of this particle in case of a uniform magnetic field, whether it is making a circular path or it is tracing a spiral path. What is the big deal? Yes, of course, there is a big deal, because these types of concepts are very much utilized for something known as your electrostatic precipitators. So obviously people may not study The major application is for environmental issues. So what we used to do, either we used to magnetize the, that thermal power plants, they used to burn coal, and when the coal is burnt out, they are exhausted into the atmosphere. And previously, what was happening, this smoke was actually containing a lot of carbon particles. So they are known as fly ash. And what we actually nowadays we are doing is that we are trying to eliminate this fly ash and let only the carbon dioxide and sulfur gases to escape into the atmosphere. So for that, what we used to do is that we used to charge these carbon particles by means of electrostatic field, and around it there will be a magnet which is producing a uniform magnetic field. So this charged particles, so first we created a electrostatic field, we charged the particles, carbon particles, then we allowed this carbon particles to enter into a strong magnetic field, uniform magnetic field. So when they are going to do that, they starts to move in circular and spherical manner, and ultimately they will come and they will reside over the surface of these magnets, and they will be scrubbed out and removed as fly ash, which can be utilized for making bricks and other things. So it is not only going to, this concept is not only going to reduce the amount of pollutants given to the atmosphere, but also we can make use of these fly ash to make bricks and other things. So these types of concept, they are very much utilized in our engineering, and we used to call these machines as electrostatic precipitators. Okay, so ESP is a very vital equipment nowadays used in all these polluting plants. Okay, so as I told you that if the charged particle is entering into a uniform magnetic field at 90 degree, then it is going to trace out a circular path, and it is going to move in this circular path with a constant speed, that is v over here, and a constant radius. Now what is the value of the expression for this radius? Now let us try to find it out. Now you all know that whenever a particle is going to rotate in a circular path, then obviously it is going to be acted upon by two forces. One is the centrifugal force, the other one is a centripetal force. Centrifugal force always tries to move the particle away from the center of the circular path, and the centripetal force will always try to move this particle towards the center of the circular path. So obviously in this case the particle is actually moving with a constant radius. That means, and this force is always directed towards the center. That means here the centripetal force is equal to mv square by r. You already know about all these things, centrifugal force and centripetal force. So in this case, the centripetal force is mv square by r, where m is nothing but the mass of the charged particle, v is the speed at which the particle is actually rotating inside the uniform magnetic field. So over here, the centripetal force must be equal to the magnetic force. So over here we can say that Fm, that was QVB, must be equal to mv square by r. Now if we will equate these two equations, then we can easily find out the value of this r. So ultimately your r is given by mv by qb. Now because this v and this v square, that gets cancelled out, and ultimately your r becomes mv by qb. Now mv, you know, mass into velocity is nothing but the momentum of the particle. So we can also express this radius in terms of momentum of the particle as p by qb. Now since it is moving, then obviously it is moving in a circular path, and if it is moving in a circular path, then what is the angular speed? Because if we know the linear speed and we know the radius, then finding the angular speed is quite easy. So the angular speed omega is equal to v by r. So obviously if we will do all this calculation over here, we are going to get the expression as this much. But obviously your angular speed, the unit is, yes, anybody who knows the unit of angular speed? Come on, tell me. Yes. Nobody knows, or you have forgotten. Okay, let me tell you.
Meter.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
meter per second.
No, it is not meter per second. Meter per second is for a linear motion, not linear
You
speed.
might be wrong, radian.
Divided by meter.
No. So you are simply doing one very cunning
Radian
thing.
per second.
So V is meter per second, R is meter. So obviously it is going to come in that way. No, that is not the way. We simply have one. Yes, my dear, please speak loudly. I cannot hear you.
Sir, is it radian?
Yes, it is not radian. Rather, I will say radian per second. Okay. So your angular speed is always expressed in radian per second. Okay. Now, but as I told you, we are using these types of concept in our electrical things. And electrical people, they always love this frequency, not this angular speed. Angular speed, they are very popular among mechanical engineers, but electrical people or electronics people or even your computer science people, they all love this frequency. And you know what is frequency? The number of cycles it is making per second. That is same thing as that of your angular speed. So is there any relationship? Yes, of course, because 2 pi f is equal to omega. This thing you have already studied. Even when you are studying +2, in your 12th paper also you have something like that. Angular speed is equal to 2 pi frequency. And remember, frequency has the unit hertz. Okay. So you must have heard about the electrical supply. It is 50 hertz in India. It is 60 hertz in US. It is 25 hertz in some of the islands in Japan. So naturally, this frequency is very popular among this electrical computer science people. So let us write it in frequency. So F is equal to omega by 2 pi. So over here, just divide this equation by 2 pi, you are going to get the frequency. And remember, this frequency has a particular name. Why? Because when we talk about frequency, a very simple thing comes into our mind. Okay, what we think is that there must be a wave like this, and over here, if for in 1 second 3 number of cycles are completed, then this is equal to 1 frequency. So everybody thinks it in this way. Sorry, this is equal to 1 time period, and from here we are getting the frequency. But here it is actually moving in a circular path. So this type of frequency and this type of frequency, even though both of them are same, but we, in order to distinguish them, because your sine wave is also circular in nature, cosine wave is also circular in nature, hyperbolic sine wave is also circular, hyperbolic cosine wave is also circular, then obviously all of them are circular, no doubt, but the waveforms are different. So when we are talking about frequency of a particle moving in a circle, then we call it a cyclotron frequency. Got it? So we call it as cyclotron frequency. So this cyclotron frequency is known as F equal to magnitude of Q B by 2 pi m. Now, why I have used this modular sign across this Q? It is because it may be a positive charge or it may be a negative charge, but frequency is always positive. It cannot be negative. So by chance, if we are not using this modular sign and we have a negative charge, we'll get the frequency in negative term, which is absolutely an invalid statement because frequency is always positive in nature. That is the reason why we have put a modular sign across this Q. I hope everybody have understood all this thing. Now let us come to another aspect. So previously we have been talking about the magnetic field and the particle moving at a velocity b perpendicular to this b. Okay, so previously we have studied something like this, that this is the magnetic field, uniform magnetic field, and I am having a particle over here which is moving into this magnetic field at a velocity v, and this v is actually perpendicular to this magnetic field. But now, is it always that we will use this at 90 degree? No, it is not like that, because 90% of the cases they are not directed perpendicularly but at some angle. Now just imagine the case over here. So this is the magnetic field, uniform magnetic field, and there is a particle over here, and this charged particle is moving and it is entering into this magnetic field at a velocity v, but it is making some angle with that of your b vector. If this is the case, is the particle going to exhibit a circular path? The answer is no. It is not going to exhibit a circular path. Rather, it is going to exhibit a spiral, or rather we call it as a helical path. That means this particle, suppose this is the electrostatic precipitator. Okay. So there is a north pole over here and there is a south pole over here. And this one is made of charged and this enters into this. So what it will do, this particle is going to move in a spherical manner, which we usually call it as a helical path, and ultimately it is going to strike and it will be going to suspend itself over here. So lots and lots of these carbon particles will get suspended over here, and there will be a scrubber mechanism over here which will just crop it out and dump it over here. So all these particles will be dumped over here. So they will be dumped as a heap of sand, and they will be carried by trucks to these fly ash brick plants, and they will make the bricks over there. So this is how the entire system is going to work. And believe me, 99 or maybe 100% of the particles are always injected into the uniform magnetic field at a velocity v, but making an angle. Why? Because if they are moving in circular path, it is of no use to us, because they will not come down and touch the surface of the magnet or the precipitator. Rather, we always inject them at some angle. So in that way, they will move in a helical path and they will be dumped, or they will attach themselves on the wall of these scrubbers, and they will be scrubbed out for proper use. But over here also, the best thing is that the radius of this spiral path or helical path is also the same. Okay, the radius of this one is again going to be mb by qb. Okay, so I hope everybody have understood all this thing, or is there any doubt? Now just have a look at this diagram. So if I rotate it by some angle, just see over here, this B is actually entering at some angle with respect to this B, and you can see this F is moving in this path. And what will happen? This will move in a helical manner like this, and it will move out of the field, and they will get dumped on the surfaces. So this is how the entire scenario is going to work for the benefit of mankind as well as the environment. So I hope everybody have understood everything. So in the next class, we'll try to complete the theoretical part of this chapter in full, and maybe on Thursday, we'll concentrate only on the problems. Okay. So I'll stop the class over here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.